When the wild Apache girl misbehaved, the cowboy gave her firm discipline. The late afternoon sun painted the wide plains in golden hues, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape of the frontier. The air was dry, carrying the smell of dust, grass, and distant pine forests. Birds circled lazily in the sky, and the faint sound of a creek trickling through a narrow valley could be heard in the distance.
It was the kind of land where the horizon seemed endless, where the hills rolled like gentle waves and the wind whispered secrets only the wild knew.
On this remote stretch of land, a small ranch stood as a lonely outpost of civilization, a place where the hard work of living off the land shaped both character and reputation. Among the scattered cabins and low wooden fences, a young Apache girl moved with a remarkable freedom. Her hair, dark and glossy, braided carelessly down her back, caught the sun in strands that seemed almost alive. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity, reflecting the wide-open sky, the rolling plains, and a fearless energy that seemed boundless. She was different from most of the children in the nearby village, not just in her spirit, but in the way she carried herself. She had a strength in her limbs that came from climbing trees, running across the hills, and learning from the natural world around her. She moved like the wind itself, quick, sharp, and unrestrained, her small feet barely making a sound on the dry earth. The people of the frontier, particularly the adults in the nearby ranch and village, often watched her from a distance. Some admired her boldness and vitality, while others worried about what her fearlessness might lead to. Life in the West was not easy, and danger was always near. Wild animals, unforgiving weather, and the harsh realities of survival could turn a moment of carelessness into disaster. But the girl did not seem to notice. She thrived on adventure. She had an innate desire to explore, to push the limits of what she could do and where she could go. It was this energy that both fascinated and frightened the adults around her. On the ranch, the cowboy watched from a distance. He was a man in his 40s, with weathered skin and hands calloused from years of riding horses, tending cattle, and managing the harsh demands of frontier life. His hat was tilted low over his eyes, a line of concern creasing his forehead as he followed the girl's movements. He had seen many children grow up in the wild lands, and he knew the consequences of recklessness. He had heard the stories of accidents, of young lives lost to one moment of daring or disobedience. Yet, despite his concern, he could not deny that there was something magnetic about the girl's spirit, a fire he had rarely seen in anyone so young. The girl had a favorite spot where the hills dipped into a gentle valley. Here the grass grew tall and soft, and a small stream cut through the earth, reflecting the late afternoon sun like a ribbon of silver. She often came to this place alone, bringing with her a small, worn satchel containing a few essentials. A knife her father had given her for protection, some dried meat, and a water skin. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the terrain, alert for anything unusual. Today, however, she had a different plan. She had heard from some older children about a wild stallion that had been seen grazing near the northern ridge. It was said to be untamable, a horse that no rider had managed to mount successfully. The thought of trying to ride it filled her with excitement, a challenge that she could not resist. As she crept through the tall grass toward the ridge, the cowboy's eyes narrowed. He knew that wild horses were unpredictable, dangerous even for skilled riders. He had spent countless hours teaching others, young and old, how to respect the animals they depended on. But this girl, so fearless, so determined, did not always heed advice. He sighed, tipping his hat back and muttering under his breath. She's too wild for her own good.
Despite his worries, he remained quiet, preferring to watch her from a safe distance rather than interfere too early.
He remembered his own youth, the stubbornness that had driven him to take risks and prove himself. There was a certain beauty in that stubbornness, a spark that could lead to great skill if guided properly. He hoped that, somehow, she could be guided without breaking the spirit that made her so remarkable. The girl reached the ridge and paused, her dark eyes taking in the sight before her. The stallion was magnificent, a creature of raw strength and energy, its coat gleaming in the sun and muscles rippling with each careful step it took through the grass. The horse lifted its head, nostrils flaring as it sensed her presence, ears flicking to catch the faintest sound. The girl's heart raced, a mixture of fear and exhilaration that made her pulse pound like a drum. She had never been so close to such a wild animal. She knew the stories, the injuries, the refusals to obey, but she also felt a deep, unspoken connection with the creature. Baz. She understood, somehow, that the horse valued its freedom as much as she did. Her first instinct was to approach slowly, hands extended, speaking softly in the language of patience she had learned from watching the elders interact with animals. The horse shifted, cautious but curious, its dark eyes meeting hers with intelligence that both fascinated and challenged her. The cowboy watched intently from behind a ridge, recognizing the signs. The girl was bold, but she was also careful, a combination that could either save her or put her in grave danger. The sun began to dip lower, casting the plains in a warm, amber glow. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the faint scent of distant sagebrush. The girl crouched low, ready to move with the horse if it decided to flee. She whispered a quiet encouragement, feeling her heart beat in time with the animal's movements. The cowboy's concern grew with every passing moment. He knew that one wrong move, one sudden spook, could send the horse into a frenzy, and the girl could be thrown violently to the ground. But the girl was fearless. She had been raised to respect nature, to understand the patterns of animals, and she had an instinctive sense of timing and patience. She had learned from watching the elders track deer, from observing the flight of birds and the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Every step she took was deliberate, every motion calculated, yet infused with the natural boldness of her spirit. For a moment, it seemed as though the stallion had accepted her presence, stepping closer, nostrils twitching. The girl's eyes lit up with triumph, a small smile playing at her lips. She felt a surge of pride. This was not just about riding a horse. It was about proving to herself that she could face fear and emerge unharmed. Yet, as she reached out to touch the horse's neck, the cowboy's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. "Careful, girl. That horse is no ordinary animal. One false move and it'll throw you like a leaf in the wind." Startled, she turned to see him approaching, boots crunching on the dry grass. There was no anger in his eyes, only concern and a quiet authority that commanded respect. She wanted to protest, to insist that she knew what she was doing, but something in his presence made her pause. Brance. The cowboy had seen enough of the wild plains, enough of danger and risk, to understand that fearlessness alone was not enough. His gaze held the wisdom of years, of trials survived and lessons learned. The girl nodded slowly, lowering her hand. I thought I could, she admitted softly. Her pride bristled, but she also recognized the truth in his words. She was strong, clever, and determined, but she was not invincible. The cowboy's eyes softened, and he gave a small nod, acknowledging her courage while making it clear that courage alone could not guarantee safety.
"Good instincts," he said.
"But instincts need guidance. You have spirit, and that's a gift. Don't waste it being careless." The girl looked back at the horse, then at the cowboy, feeling a mix of frustration and respect. She was not used to being told what to do, and yet she could see that this was not punishment. It was protection, a way to help her survive in a world that could be as unforgiving as it was beautiful. As the sun dipped lower behind the distant hills, casting the land in shades of orange and purple, the girl and the cowboy walked back toward the ranch. She was silent at first, lost in thought, while he kept a careful watch, his mind already considering how he could teach her the skills she would need to explore safely. There would be lessons, of course, but not harsh ones. Lessons in patience, observation, and respect for the world around her. By the time they reached the edge of the ranch, the stars were beginning to appear, tiny points of light in the vast sky. The girl paused, looking up at them, feeling a strange sense of calm and excitement all at once. She had faced the wild, and though she had not conquered it, she had touched it. And she had learned that strength alone was not enough. There was wisdom to be gained, and she was ready, in her own way, to learn it. The cowboy tipped his hat once more, giving her a look that was both stern and approving. He knew the journey ahead would be long, that guiding her spirit would take patience and care. But he also knew that, with the right guidance, this wild Apache girl could grow into someone remarkable, someone who could face the untamed world without fear, yet with respect. And so, the evening settled over the plains, quiet except for the wind through the grass and the occasional call of a distant owl. A new understanding had been reached, delicate but important. The girl had learned a small but crucial truth about courage, and the cowboy had glimpsed the potential of a spirit that could not be tamed, only guided. In the vast wild lands of the frontier, this was the beginning of a story, one that would test bravery, teach lessons, and shape lives in ways both gentle and firm. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, spilling soft golden light across the rolling plains. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and the earthy aroma of the dew-covered grass. Birds sang quietly in the trees, and the sound of horses' hooves from the ranch hinted at the day's early work. The Apache girl was already awake, her dark hair tangled from sleep, her eyes shining with the same restless energy that had always driven her to explore. Today she felt a strange mix of impatience and excitement. Breaths brusp. She had been thinking about the stallion all night. The thought of the wild horse, so strong and untamed, had filled her dreams. She imagined herself riding it across the open plains, the wind rushing past her face, the horse's hooves pounding the ground with powerful rhythm. Her heart thumped as she remembered the cowboy's warning from the previous evening. He had spoken with calm authority, emphasizing caution, respect, and patience. But in the quiet of her own thoughts, the girl felt her defiance stirring. She had listened, but she had also decided. Some rules were meant to be tested, and some limits were meant to be challenged. She dressed quickly, putting on a simple cotton blouse and trousers suitable for riding, and tied her hair back into a loose braid. She filled her water skin, grabbed a small satchel with dried meat, and quietly slipped out of the cabin before anyone else was awake. The ranch was still wrapped in morning mist, and the world seemed unusually still, as though it held its breath for the adventure she was about to undertake. The cowboy, meanwhile, had begun his day early, feeding the horses and checking the fences. He was a man of routine, the kind of discipline required to survive on the frontier. As he walked between the stables, he noticed the cabin door slightly ajar and a familiar figure disappearing into the mist toward the northern ridge. His brow furrowed. He had hoped that the girl would heed his warning and stay close to the ranch. Instead, she was already moving toward the wild stallion, her fearless spirit propelling her forward. The girl crept through the tall grass, her feet light on the dew-soaked ground. She moved with care, keeping her presence low and quiet, aware of the delicate senses of the wildlife around her. Rabbits froze in their burrows, deer lifted their heads cautiously, and birds fluttered from tree to tree. But chores round and desk. Yet her mind was only on the horse. When she finally glimpsed it through a gap in the ridge, her breath caught. The stallion was even more magnificent in the bright morning light, muscles gleaming, mane flowing in the wind. Its eyes were sharp, alert, and full of intelligence. She approached slowly, speaking in soft whispers, just as she had done the day before. "Easy, easy," she murmured, reaching out a hand. The horse shifted nervously, ears flicking backward, nostrils flaring. For a moment, it seemed as though it might bolt. The girl froze, holding her breath. Then, as though sensing her gentle intention, the stallion relaxed slightly, lowering its head. Her heart soared with triumph. But the thrill of being near the wild animals soon turned into an irresistible challenge. She had not come to simply observe the horse. She wanted to ride it. She climbed a nearby rock, placing herself at a height that would give her leverage. With one smooth motion, she swung herself toward the horse's back. The horse snorted loudly, startled by her sudden movement, and stepped back. The girl's hand slipped slightly, and she stumbled, catching herself just in time. From the ridge below, the cowboy watched with a tightening chest. He knew that her courage could easily turn into danger. He began moving quickly toward her, boots thudding against the earth, calling her name. "Careful! Stop!" he shouted, though his voice carried a calm firmness rather than panic. He did not want to frighten the horse further, only to intervene if necessary. The girl paused, looking down at the cowboy with a mixture of pride and defiance. "I can do this," she said, her voice steady. "I know what I'm doing." Her eyes sparkled with determination. The cowboy shook his head slightly, his face set in a mask of concern. He had learned long ago that arguments were useless when dealing with a determined spirit. Sometimes one had to let the first steps happen before gently guiding the young adventurer back to safety. She reached for the horse again, this time gripping its mane tightly. The stallion moved its head, snorting, and took a step back. The girl's body shifted with it, trying to balance. For a few tense seconds, it seemed as if she might actually stay on. She felt a surge of triumph, her pulse racing, her eyes bright with excitement. She had faced fear and uncertainty and had almost conquered it, yet the cowboy knew the truth. The stallion was unpredictable, and one misstep could end disastrously. As if sensing the danger, the horse suddenly bolted, lunging forward. The girl clung desperately, her small hands digging into the mane, but her footing was unsteady. She bounced along the horse's back, sliding dangerously close to being thrown. The wind whipped against her face, her heart pounding with a mix of terror and exhilaration. She had never felt anything so powerful, so alive, and yet so uncontrollable. The cowboy ran faster now, reaching the base of the ridge just as the horse began to turn wildly. He grabbed a thick rope from his belt, ready to use it if necessary. His voice rang out, calm but commanding. "Hold still! Listen to me!" The girl's eyes widened at his sudden presence, and for a moment she faltered. She tried to steady herself, but the horse was in motion, and her balance wavered. With experience born of years on the frontier, the cowboy approached quickly, keeping low and moving in rhythm with the horse. He knew that panic would make things worse. He spoke in short, clear commands, encouraging both the girl and the animal to remain calm. Slowly, carefully, he guided the horse into a more controlled movement, keeping it from bolting completely. The girl, though frightened, began to follow his instructions, feeling the strange mix of fear and trust. When the horse finally slowed to a steady trot, the cowboy moved closer and extended a hand to help the girl dismount. She slid off carefully, her legs shaking from the adrenaline. Her face was flushed, and her dark eyes were wide, still reflecting the thrill of the near disaster. The cowboy's expression softened, though his tone remained firm.
"You must understand," he said. "Bravery is not just about doing what scares you. It's about knowing your limits and respecting the power of what you face."
The girl nodded slowly, still catching her breath. She wanted to argue, to insist that she could have ridden the horse if only given the chance, but she could see the truth in his eyes. This was not punishment. It was guidance, a lesson in the way the world worked. She realized that strength, courage, and determination were not enough on their own. They had to be combined with patience, awareness, and respect for forces greater than oneself. After a few moments, the cowboy helped the girl steady herself and led her away from the ridge. The horse had calmed, grazing quietly on the grass, its energy subdued but not broken. The girl cast a glance back at the stallion, a mixture of longing and newfound understanding in her gaze. She felt the lesson deep in her bones. The wild could be approached but never controlled by force alone. As they walked back toward the ranch, the morning sun climbed higher, casting the land in a bright, unforgiving light. The girl's steps were slower now, her earlier recklessness tempered by the knowledge of what could have happened. The cowboy kept a watchful eye on her, knowing that today had been a turning point. She had faced danger and survived, but she had also learned that guidance and discipline were not enemies of freedom. They were the tools that made freedom meaningful and safe. By the time they reached the edge of the ranch, the sounds of daily work filled the air. Horses neighing, the clatter of tools, and the voices of ranch hands calling to one another. The girl paused, taking it all in, and felt a deep appreciation for the lessons she had been taught. She was still wild at heart, still fearless and curious, but she understood now that some adventures required preparation and respect. She looked at the cowboy, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. The cowboy tipped his hat, a small smile breaking through his usually stern expression. He had seen many young people grow up on the frontier, but few had the spirit and potential of this girl. She was brave, clever, and independent, but she had learned an important lesson today, one that could keep her safe while still allowing her spirit to soar. The girl sat by the stream near the ranch, water flowing gently past her hands as she reflected on the morning's events. She had been reckless, yes, but she had also been alive in a way that few people ever experienced. And she had been guided, not scolded, by someone who understood the delicate balance between courage and wisdom. She promised herself that she would carry this lesson forward, not as a restriction, but as a key to exploring the world with both boldness and care. The cowboy watched from a distance, satisfied that the morning had been a success despite the scare. He knew that the girl's spirit could never be tamed completely, nor should it be. His role was not to suppress her wildness, but to shape it, to ensure that her boldness did not lead to harm. And in that understanding, both teacher and student had gained something precious, a mutual respect that would guide them through the challenges of frontier life. The sun rose higher, casting the plains in bright golden light, and the day began in earnest. Life on the ranch moved forward, work to be done, animals to tend, and lessons to be remembered. The girl's heart was still racing from the morning's adventure, but now it beat with a rhythm tempered by awareness. She had tested the wild-faced danger, and learned that true courage was more than daring. It was understanding, patience, and respect. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the plains and casting long shadows across the ranch. The morning's excitement with the wild stallion still lingered in the Apache girl's mind. She had faced danger, felt the power of the untamed horse beneath her, and survived. But now, as the adrenaline faded, a new feeling settled over her, a mixture of humility, curiosity, and a faint unease. She knew the cowboy had intervened just in time, and though she had not liked being stopped, she understood that his actions had saved her from serious harm. The cowboy led her toward the barn where the scent of hay, leather, and animals mixed in the warm air. He had a serious look on his face, but it was softened by concern rather than anger. His boots clomped steadily on the wooden floorboards, each step a reminder of experience and authority. The girl followed, a little hesitant, feeling the weight of the lesson she was about to receive. She was not in trouble in the way that children sometimes were, but she knew this moment carried importance. The cowboy had always believed in teaching through action and example, and she sensed that today would be no different. He gestured toward the stallion, now calm and grazing quietly, and spoke in a calm, even tone. "You have courage," he began, "and that's a rare thing. Most people are afraid of the wild. But courage without understanding is dangerous. You need to learn how to use your courage wisely." The girl nodded, though she fidgeted slightly, restless with energy. She wanted to argue, to defend her actions, but she also felt the weight of his words. They were not meant to scold her, but to guide her, to help her see the world more clearly. "Come here," the cowboy said, motioning to a nearby log where they could sit. The girl hesitated, then complied, perching on the log with her legs swinging. The cowboy sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space, giving her the comfort of attention without intimidation. He looked out at the fields, the horses, and the distant hills, as if drawing from the land itself to explain what he had to say. "Do you understand why I stopped you?" he asked gently. The girl thought for a moment. "Yes," she said finally. "The horse could have thrown me. I might have been hurt." Her voice was small, almost hesitant, but sincere. "That's right," he said. "And it's not just about the horse. It's about respecting the world around you. The plains, the animals, the people. They all have rules, even if they are not written down. Ignoring them can lead to pain, sometimes for yourself, sometimes for others." The girl looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. She had always valued her freedom, her ability to explore and test herself. Now, she realized that freedom carried responsibility, a responsibility she had only begun to understand. The cowboy reached into his satchel and pulled out a small leather strap, worn from years of use. The girl's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of fear crossing her face. She had seen similar tools used for correction before, but she could sense from the cowboy's expression that this was not punishment. It was teaching, a way to instill understanding and care through guidance rather than force. "This," he said, holding the strap gently, "is a tool for training, not just horses, but people too. It's not about pain.
It's about learning. You need to understand that actions have consequences, and sometimes lessons must be felt to be remembered."
The girl swallowed, nodding slowly. Her spirit had been wild, unbridled, but she was beginning to see that strength alone was not enough. She needed to learn patience, control, and awareness. She needed guidance from someone who had lived the life she was only beginning to experience. The cowboy stood, motioning for her to follow him to the corral. The horses stirred, sensing movement, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of hooves against the dirt. He demonstrated first, showing how to approach a horse with calm authority, how to move with confidence but not force, how to speak in quiet tones that communicated respect rather than command. The girl watched closely, absorbing each gesture, each subtle movement. "Now you try," he said, handing her the strap. "Remember, this is not about being harsh. It's about communicating. You must understand the animal, respect it, and show that you are aware of its strength and limits." The girl took a deep breath, stepping toward a gentle mare that had been watching her curiously. She held the strap loosely, her fingers trembling slightly. She spoke softly as the cowboy had shown her, and guided the mare with careful steps. The horse responded, moving in a way that was controlled, steady, and calm. The girl's eyes widened with surprise and pride. She had done it. She had communicated with the animal not through force, but through awareness and respect. The cowboy nodded approvingly. "Good. You're learning. This is how courage is tempered into wisdom. The wild can be faced without fear, but it must always be treated with care." They spent the rest of the morning practicing, the girl learning to approach different horses, to understand their movements, and to anticipate their reactions. The cowboy was patient but firm, correcting mistakes gently, praising successes and guiding her every step of the way. Each interaction was a lesson, not only in handling animals but in understanding consequences, observing carefully, and acting responsibly. By midday the sun was high and the air was warm. The girl's arms ached from holding the strap and guiding the horses. but she felt a deep satisfaction. She had faced her fear, learned new skills, and gained a sense of confidence tempered by respect. She looked at the cowboy, gratitude and pride shining in her eyes. "You're doing well," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Remember, strength is not just in the body, it's in the mind, in your awareness, in your ability to see what others miss. Courage without understanding is like a horse without reins. You may run fast, but you can crash at any moment." The girl nodded, thinking of the stallion from the morning. She had run fast, she had tested herself, but she had almost crashed. Now, she understood the importance of control, awareness, and guidance. Her wild spirit was still alive, but it had been shaped, focused, and refined. After a short break under the shade of a large oak tree, the cowboy decided it was time for the next lesson. He led the girl to a nearby hill where the wind swept across the plains, strong and steady. He asked her to observe the land, to notice the subtle signs of wildlife, the patterns of the grass, and the sounds carried by the wind. "Understanding your surroundings," he explained, "is just as important as strength or skill. The more you observe, the safer and more capable you become." The girl followed his instructions, eyes wide, absorbing every detail. She watched a hawk circle above, noting how it shifted with the wind, how its eyes scanned the ground. Desperation. She listened to the rustling grass, the distant call of a coyote, and the whisper of the wind through the hills. Each sound, each movement, became a lesson in awareness, teaching her patience and careful observation. By late afternoon, the cowboy guided her back toward the corral. They practiced more with the horses, reinforcing the skills she had learned and building her confidence. The girl's movements were no longer rushed or reckless. They were deliberate, careful, and in harmony with the animals around her. The cowboy observed her closely, a quiet satisfaction growing in his chest. But to control herself, to balance courage with wisdom. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the plains in hues of orange and gold, the girl and the cowboy sat together on a low fence, watching the horses graze. The girl's face was flushed with exertion and excitement, her eyes bright with understanding. She had faced danger, received firm guidance, and learned important lessons that would stay with her for a lifetime.
"You've come a long way today," the cowboy said.
You're still wild at heart, and that's good. But you've learned that courage is not enough.
Breath. Strength is not enough. Wisdom, patience, and respect, these are what make true courage meaningful. The girl nodded, feeling a quiet pride and a newfound sense of purpose. She had not been broken, nor had her spirit been tamed. Instead, it had been shaped, refined, and guided in a way that allowed her freedom to coexist with understanding.
She knew now that her adventures could be even greater if approached with care and knowledge.
As the stars began to appear in the evening sky, the cowboy stood, tipping his hat to the girl. "Remember, the wild will always be here," he said. "It's strong, it's untamed, and it's full of lessons. Face it with courage, but never without respect. And always remember that guidance is not weakness, it is strength shared." The girl looked at him, a smile lighting her face. Burst. She felt a deep connection to the land, to the animals, and to the man who had guided her without taking away her spirit. She was still wild, still daring, but now she understood how to channel that energy safely and wisely. And so, as the night settled over the plains, a new understanding was forged, a bond of respect, trust, and careful guidance. The Apache girl had learned that discipline was not a punishment but a way to grow stronger, smarter, and more capable. The cowboy had taught not with anger, but with patience, firmness, and insight, showing her that true courage could only thrive when paired with wisdom. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the promise of future adventures. Each one approached with bravery, respect, and the lessons learned on this long, unforgettable day. The morning after the long day of lessons dawned calm and clear. The sun rose slowly over the plains, casting a soft golden light that seemed to make the world glow. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and wild flowers. Birds chirped in the distance, their calls weaving a quiet melody through the stillness. The Apache girl woke early, her mind replaying the lessons from the previous day. Every detail of the cowboy's guidance lingered in her memory. The careful steps with the horses, the quiet voice that had calmed them, the way he had shown her that courage alone was not enough. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back neatly, and took a moment to look out over the rolling plains. There was a strange serenity to the landscape, a feeling of balance and order that she had not noticed before. The wildness of the land was still there, untamed and powerful. But she now understood that strength, patience, and respect were the keys to navigating it safely. The girl felt a sense of quiet pride. She was still fearless, still eager for adventure, but her spirit had been tempered by the lessons she had learned. The cowboy had already begun his morning work. He was tending to the horses, checking fences, and preparing for the tasks of the day. When he noticed the girl approaching, he offered a small nod of acknowledgement. There was no need for words. Both knew that yesterday had changed something important. The girl felt a quiet respect for the cowboy, a deep appreciation for the guidance he had offered, without diminishing her spirit. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Good morning," she replied, her own voice carrying a new sense of confidence. She had learned to temper her excitement with thoughtfulness, and it showed in her tone. The cowboy gestured toward the field. "Today, we will continue, but in a different way. I want you to apply what you learned yesterday on your own. Watch the animals, observe the land, and think about the choices you make before you act. You will make mistakes, and that is fine, but remember to use your mind as well as your courage." The girl nodded eagerly, feeling a mix of anticipation and responsibility. She had always been driven by instinct, but now she had something more, a framework for understanding the world around her. She could see that the cowboy's lessons were not about restriction, but about empowerment. She walked toward a nearby corral where a young horse grazed quietly. The mare's coat shone in the morning sunlight, and her eyes were calm and observant. The girl approached slowly, applying the techniques the cowboy had taught her. She spoke softly, moved deliberately, and held the leather strap loosely, not as a tool of control but as a means of communication. The horse responded to her patience and awareness, moving with gentle obedience. The girl smiled, a thrill of accomplishment running through her. As the morning progressed, she practiced with different horses, each one teaching her something new. Some were cautious and hesitant, others spirited and bold. She learned to adjust her approach, to read the subtle cues of each animal, and to respect their strengths and limitations. With every interaction, her confidence grew, not as a reckless force, but as a measured, thoughtful courage. The cowboy watched quietly from a distance, his heart swelling with pride. She was learning not only to handle the animals, but to understand herself, to balance her wild spirit with careful thought. After several hours, the cowboy called her over. They walked together toward the edge of a small hill, where the wind swept across the plains with steady force.
"Look out over the land," he said.
Notice the signs of life, the changes in the grass, the movement of the animals. Every detail matters. The more you observe, the more prepared you will be for anything the world throws at you.
The girl crouched on the hillside, eyes wide, absorbing every detail.
She noticed a hawk circling above, its wings catching the sunlight, its sharp eyes scanning the ground. She saw rabbits darting through the grass, deer moving cautiously along the distant hills, and the sway of the trees responding to the wind. Every movement told a story. Every sound carried information. She felt a sense of connection to the land, a deeper understanding that her bravery must be matched by awareness. The cowboy spoke again, his voice calm and measured. True courage is not just about facing danger. It is about understanding it. It is about respecting the power around you and knowing how to act wisely. You have spirit, and that is rare. But wisdom will make your spirit stronger, safer, and more effective.
The girl nodded, taking in his words. She understood now that discipline and guidance were not threats to her freedom.
They were tools to help her grow, to ensure that her adventures would not end in harm. Her mind, which had once been driven only by instinct, was beginning to balance courage with thought, action with patience. The afternoon passed in a series of small exercises. The girl practiced riding carefully trained horses, guiding them through obstacles, observing their reactions, and making decisions based on what she had learned. She learned how to anticipate sudden movements, how to communicate through body language and voice, and how to remain calm under pressure. Each moment was a lesson, each success a confirmation of her growing skill. By evening, the girl and the cowboy returned to the ranch. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The plains bathed in the soft glow of sunset. The horses were fed and settled into their stalls, and the girl felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. She had faced challenges, learned from them, and grown stronger, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The cowboy stood beside her, tipping his hat slightly. "You have learned much," he said. "But remember, learning never ends." The wild is always changing, and there will always be new lessons. Courage and strength are gifts, but wisdom and respect will carry you further than either alone. The girl smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. She had tested herself, faced danger, and been guided toward a better understanding of the world. Her spirit remained wild, but it was now tempered by awareness and care. She felt a deep gratitude for the cowboy, who had taught her not with anger, but with patience, firmness, and insight. As night fell, the girl sat quietly outside her cabin, gazing at the stars. The vast sky stretched endlessly above her, each point of light a reminder of the world's beauty and mystery. She thought about the lessons she had learned, the balance of courage and wisdom, the importance of patience, and the value of guidance. She felt a connection not only to the land and animals, but to the people who cared for her and guided her growth. The cowboy watched from a distance, his figure outlined by the glow of the cabin's lanterns. He knew that the girl's journey was only beginning, that there would be many more challenges and adventures. But he also knew that she had gained something precious, the ability to face the world with fearless energy, tempered by careful thought. That combination, he realized, would serve her well in every trial she encountered. The next morning, the girl rose early again, filled with anticipation and curiosity. She moved through the ranch with purpose, observing the horses, the land, and the activities of the ranch hands. She noticed things she had missed before, the way the wind shifted through the hills, the sounds of animals communicating with one another, and the subtle changes in the terrain that could signal danger or opportunity. Her senses were sharper, her awareness heightened, and her confidence grounded in understanding. The cowboy joined her as she worked, offering occasional advice and corrections, but largely allowing her to explore and apply what she had learned. The girl responded with a careful attentiveness, eager to test herself while respecting the guidance she had received. Together they moved through the day with a sense of rhythm and understanding, their bond strengthened by shared experience and mutual respect. By evening, the girl had learned more than she could have imagined. She had faced challenges, made mistakes, corrected them, and grown stronger for it. She had discovered that true courage was not reckless bravado, but a careful, thoughtful engagement with the world. She had learned the value of patience, observation, and respect, for animals, for the land, and for the people who cared for her. The cowboy looked at her with quiet pride. "You are ready," he said softly. "Ready to explore, to face the wild, and to do so with strength, wisdom, and respect. Your spirit is yours, but now you have the tools to guide it safely and wisely." The girl smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She was still wild, still daring, but she understood that her freedom was most powerful when paired with knowledge and awareness. She felt a new confidence, a balance between adventure and caution, courage and wisdom. As the stars appeared once more in the night sky, the girl and the cowboy stood together, looking out over the plains. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the promise of future adventures. The girl knew she would continue to explore, to test herself, and to face the unknown. But she also knew she would do so with respect, awareness, and the lessons she had learned guiding her every step. The cowboy tipped his hat, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. He had taught, guided, and protected. And in return, he had seen a remarkable spirit grow stronger, wiser, and more capable. The girl's laughter echoed softly across the plains, a sound of freedom, joy, and newfound understanding. In the quiet of the night, the plains seemed calm and safe, yet full of possibility. The girl had faced the wild, learned its lessons, and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the adventures ahead. And the cowboy, watching over the land he had come to care for deeply, knew that he had played a part in shaping a spirit that would carry its lessons far into the future. The Apache girl had grown, not tamed, and her wild heart now beat with courage, guided by wisdom. The frontier was vast and full of challenges, but she was ready to meet them, with the cowboy's teachings echoing in her mind, shaping her steps and lighting her way.